The retired Army General was the first ever black person to serve as US Secretary of State and as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Let's cross now to Kethevane Gorjestani, who's actually there in front of the cathedral. There are a number of former presidents attending this service, Kethevane, but it's not a state funeral as such, is it?
No, officially it's not a state funeral. It is a private ceremony for Colin Powell, but it has really the feels of a state funeral. You mentioned it. Former presidents Barack Obama and George Bush are here with their wives. Secretary Hillary Clinton is also present, but Bill Clinton, however, is not due to some medical issues. He was hospitalized recently, so he's not attending. The U.S. President Joe Biden and the First Lady are also here at the Washington National Cathedral, and you can see right behind me, I'm going to step aside a little bit, you can see the hearse, which arrived at around 11:30 local time. That is right outside the doors of the National Cathedral. The casket is about to be brought out and inside the cathedral for that ceremony to begin, a ceremony during which we're going to hear from a few speakers that were close to Colin Powell, starting with Richard Armitage, who was his deputy when he was a Secretary of State in the early 2000s, as well as Madeleine Albright, who served as the Secretary of State right before Colin Powell. That was under the Clinton administration. And finally, there will be a tribute from Colin Powell's son, and so that will be a part of this private ceremony that feels a whole lot like a state funeral for someone that really worked under so many administrations, both Republican and Democrat, and all these people who are here today. There is, for example, Condoleezza Rice, but also current members of the administration like Secretary of State Tony Blinken, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, also present. So all of them here today to pay tribute to Colin Powell, as this casket is now going to be carried inside the Washington National Cathedral.
But Kethevane, I mean, despite the fact he was a highly accomplished individual, I mean, the reality is that his tenure as Secretary of State was marred somewhat by his UN address in 2003, in which he cited faulty information to claim that Iraq's then leader Saddam Hussein had secretly stashed weapons for mass destruction, but such weapons never materialised. So, you know, I mean, if anything, it is something that he is remembered for in terms of his speech at the UN at that time.
Yes, definitely. And he actually acknowledged that himself. He said that this was going to be forever a stain on his career, and he called it the biggest mistake of his career. He later on in life, after the fact, really acknowledged that he had made a mistake. He also believed that he had been misled, but he really felt very regretful about what he had done regarding the invasion of Iraq, and especially that speech at the United Nations. So he was seen by many, even the biggest critics of the Iraq War, seen as one of those people who actually acknowledged his mistake and acknowledged that he had been wrong in that case. And that is also why a lot of officials here and people who were with him, worked with him, his friends, feel that he was someone who deserved respect, because he was able to recognize his flaws, to recognize his mistakes. So yes, for the world, he will be remembered, and his career will have that stain, as he called it, on his career. But he is also someone who is, despite all of that, one could say, still very much respected, and respected on both sides of the aisle, which in today's Washington is pretty rare, and rare enough to be noted. Republicans, Democrats alike really praising this man who was at the forefront, who was a barrier breaker as the first African American to hold most of these positions. But as you said, that stain, that record, that speech at the United Nations will be one of his big regrets and one of his big mistakes.
Kethevane Gorjestani, who's covering there that memorial service for Colin Powell, the former US Secretary of State. Kethevane, thank you.